Americans, what is something us Europeans aren't ready to hear? The way people drive in Italy makes me understand why they're so religious. Most every European I've met who hasn't been here before has been totally unprepared for the massive size of the US. We had some distant relatives come to Boston from Scotland. We asked what their plans were, and one of the things they wanted to do was take a day trip to LA. I asked, "Did you rent a rocket car?" I had an Airbnb in Salt Lake City, and it was very common to have guests fly in and announce they were going to check out Moab or Zion or Vegas for the afternoon. How does someone plan an entire international trip and have no idea about something like that? You're gonna need air conditioners in your homes pretty soon. Yeah. We're still in denial for the most part, but slowly coming to understand that. Our ideas of foreign cuisine are basically products of the immigrant experience. I had an interesting sidebar tangent thought thing in a similar vein recently. The biscuit versus biscuit debate between UK and USA. Apparently at around the time of the American Revolution, American biscuits were a product that grew out of food shortages and supply limitations. They didn't have any leavening, so they were pretty crispy. They were similar to other biscuits in the UK at the time. They were mostly used as a way to make the most of what you had, and to help the flour keep longer, especially for travel, on both sides of the Atlantic. But then as our histories diverged more and more over time, so did our food cultures. UK biscuits stayed crispy and went sweet. US biscuits went fluffy and savory. The leavening agent used in US biscuits derived from pearl ash/potash and was native to the US and used by Native Americans as a leavening agent. Experimentation through the Victorian period eventually led to the development of baking powder, which ended up being used as a crucial ingredient for American biscuits. So, American biscuits and UK biscuits are cousins with a shared history, which is why they share a name. Man. That's the most interesting thing I've read today. Similar thing with American chocolate, especially Hershey's, supposedly tasting like vomit. For those who haven't heard this before, a TLDR. The story goes something like this: America's big. America doesn't have refrigeration yet. To make sure chocolate is available year-round and accessible to everyone, they deliberately spoil the fresh milk, thereby ensuring the chocolate is more stable. End result, the chocolate has a slight tang to it. Americans are more likely to be used to it, reminds you of childhood. Europeans aren't used to it, which is why British tabloids like the Daily Mail have in the past used this as an excuse to bash the US. I live in Belgium. I know what great chocolate tastes like. I can appreciate American stuff for what it is, and assume America also makes high-quality stuff, but unlike the Daily Mail, I know enough about chocolate to know that it's not feasible/too expensive to ship it to Europe without it degrading too much. Reality, it's just different. Hershey's is mass-market chocolate. And if we're making a list of countries that get to lecture America on cuisine, the UK isn't going to be at the top of that list. This is what people don't get about Italian or Chinese food in the US. It was brought over 200 years ago and was made with the ingredients they had available. It grew separately from the food in those original countries. I understand some names being the same makes it confusing when there are ingredient differences, but be a little flexible for God's sake. Corned beef and cabbage is also American. It was made by Irish immigrants because the corned beef tasted a bit like the bacon they were familiar with back home. Quit smoking. I was just in Italy for 10 days. I loved it, and there were a lot of things I thought I wish we had that, but man, everything smelled like cigarettes and sewage. I'm from Italy and I agree, I'm in the first year of high school and at least half of my class smokes, lol. That's a no good. It's a me. Emphysema. Public toilets being free should be a standard. Not an American, but having to pay €1 to just wash my hands at an Italian train station was wild. The KFC Double Down will both disgust and delight you. Y'all are getting fat too. In France anything tastes good with enough butter. I was surprised to discover how friendly and helpful Americans are. From watching TV you just come across as assholes, but in person you guys are great. I once went to a cafe in America where the barista, after handing me my coffee, told me to have a dynamite day. No one has told me to have a dynamite day since. Later that day, when my coffee exploded. Going to the bathroom is a human right and should be free. The irony of having free healthcare but having to pay to use the bathroom. Biscuits and gravy is delicious. I watched a TikTok of Irish high schoolers trying biscuits and gravy for the first time. And watching their reactions go from fear and disgust to heaven and bliss was amazing. Laughing emoji. I saw some British teens try them too and it was the exact same thing. Voice how they thought it looked vile and like vomit, tried it, and I think all but one were basically gushing over how delicious it was. Americans have big portion sizes in restaurants because we have a big leftovers culture. While some people will eat their whole meal, it's completely normal if you don't and you'll be offered a to-go box to take it home. There isn't really a big expectation to finish your meal at restaurants. Going to restaurants growing up, my parents would always order me a regular adult meal and the leftovers would be my next 2 to 3 meals. We're not uncultured. It's a 10-hour flight to a foreign country. We can't just drive over to another country for a weekend getaway. It's also not that I don't want to go to overseas, but like, I can go to the Appalachian Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, vastly different places, tropical islands, there's thousands of beaches from sunny to frozen, the Great Lakes are their own thing, there's a giant desert with all kinds of places and national parks to explore. And all of these places have extremely different local cultures and require a few hours of traveling versus overnight flights that cost 5 times as much. It just makes more sense to travel within the United States for me, most of the time. In the USA there's a ton of people that actually wear pajamas in public. Come visit Dublin. It's not just in the US. When people say Americans are blank, I feel like they don't realize how huge America is. We span 5 time zones, which makes it hard to be consistent in anything, and it's really impossible to lump us all into a single group. Edit, 6 time zones. Enough to forget about some. True. I have traveled to Europe and they all forget this. I met a guy in Germany who was planning a trip to the US. I had to deliver the bad news that his trip was wildly unrealistic as he wanted to travel to every corner of the US in 2 weeks. That reminds me, I met a Belgian couple at the first Pokemon Go Fest in Chicago. They said they wanted to spend a day in LA until they realized it's a 30-hour drive. Not all American beer tastes like water. Yes, many big-name domestic beers taste watery, but not all of them. There are also tons of great craft breweries and microbreweries all over the country that make great beer. We also don't all drink Budweiser. I certainly don't. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are yummy. American people does not equal American government. The US is not one culture or one accent. There are 11 distinct cultures and many variations within those cultures. You can get absolutely culture shock moving from one area to another. There are 30 major dialects and many variations on those dialects. Also, fast food is not our cuisine. The food I grew up eating in the South is very different from the food I eat here in the Mid-Atlantic/Midwest. The immigration patterns, socio-economic factors, geography and Native American influences can really affect how regional cuisine develops. Depending on the European country, your healthcare system sucks, too. I was shocked to find out that friends of mine were just paying for private insurance on top of the government healthcare they had already paid for, and that some of them were coming to the US for medical procedures because they couldn't get them scheduled because the government had decided that they weren't important enough. Part of the reason you have access to some of the drugs and procedures that were really expensive to develop is that the US taxpayers and patients are paying high prices. Then, after the company recoups the cost, they also sell them to countries with single-payer healthcare.